My name is Corbin Heist. I come from Greensboro, North Carolina originally, and I've been living in Oxford, United Kingdom for the past year and a half.
Ich heiße Marie Suttmann und ich komme aus Deutschland, aus München.
I'm Ian. I'm from Virginia.
I'm Michael. I'm from Cherryville, North Carolina.
I'm Cedar Dillard. I come from Virginia.
Ich heiße Philipp. Ich komme aus Höhenkirchen und ja, jetzt beantworte ich ein paar Fragen.
Cool. Also ich heiße Elisa Schmusser und ich komme aus Deutschland.
Ich heiße Magnus. Sorry. My name is Magnus. I'm from Rohrbach. It's near Ingolstadt. It's near Munich. I'm 20 years old. At the moment I study social work at Eichstätt. And from March 2015 I will go to be a policeman.
You know, 16.
So
in Germany.
In Germany, yeah. So do you think that's too young or is that okay?
I guess it's okay. I mean, I don't really know why I wouldn't, as long as you drink like beer or something like light alcohol.
Probably 16, I think. Yeah.
So do you think that's too young or is that okay?
I think it's more a function of culture than anything else. Like, whether or not it's okay is more a question of whether or not it's being abused and that abuse is causing harm. And so, I mean, I don't think I can really answer that question, is whether or not it's okay, without, you know, determining whether or not it's causing harm. So I don't know whether or not it's causing harm. Yes, probably about, well, significant quantities in about 15. I think everyone sort of had, you know, a glass of wine or something before that, but not in actually drinking it.
All right. Do you think that that's too young or is that okay?
I mean, I think the earlier you start to drink, you learn the proper ways to handle yourself, I suppose. Like, just how to act when you're intoxicated and what's acceptable and what's not.
Normal, also die meisten Jugendlichen fangen schon mit 14 an oder mit 13 und ich finde, dass es eigentlich zu früh ist, weil viele das nur aus Gruppenzwang machen und ich finde das eigentlich nicht so gut. Ich habe es zwar selber auch gemacht, aber ich finde es nicht gut.
So I think it's a little bit lower than like the drinking age, 21, just because of colleges nationwide.
Mm-hmm. So what age do you think you'd put on it?
I don't know, maybe 18 or 19, somewhere in there.
So do you think that's too young or is that okay?
It's okay to a point. I think the reasoning behind the drinking age at 21 is just so kids don't drink and drive. But
I would say probably somewhere between 15 and 18.
So do you think that's too young or is that fine?
I think it's fine, but it really depends on kind of how you grew up and how you are as far as maturity and everything at that point.
Probably 18, 19. A lot of people drank whenever they got to the first year of college. I didn't start drinking until I was like 20. It's like last year. But I think most people start when they get to college. So that's typically 18 or 19.
Okay, so do you think that that's too young or is that okay?
I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense that people, when they are legal adults, want to be able to do whatever they want. I definitely felt like whenever I turned 18, it was really dumb that there were still parts of the grocery store that were forbidden. Like, that was the biggest problem I had. I can't go into the grocery store and buy whatever I want, but I am considered an adult and whatever. So I think it makes sense for people to want to drink once they're like without their parents or when they feel like they're starting to get their independence. So I think it makes sense.
Ja, also ich würde mal sagen, da muss man unterscheiden zwischen jetzt hartem Alkohol und nicht so starkem, also zum Beispiel Bier. Darf man ja in Deutschland auch ab 16 schon trinken. Und irgendwelchen Schnaps oder so erst ab 18 und ich denke, es ist schon okay, wenn man auch vor dem 16. Geburtstag mal ein Bier oder sowas trinkt. Und man sollte halt nur nicht damit übertreiben. Also man kann auch gern schon mal vor dem 18. irgendeinen Schnaps oder so trinken, aber es sollte halt nicht zu viel werden. Es sollte nicht übertreiben.
Ja, so ist es zu früh oder geht das?
Ist,
16 und früh?
ja, im Allgemeinen ist es schon okay. So die Altersbeschränkungen hier sind schon okay. Also in Amerika zum Beispiel finde ich das heftig. Das ist viel zu weit oben, finde ich. Das ist ja, macht ja keinen Spaß.
Ich würde sagen mit 15
15?
ist es okay,
Ja.
dass man das erste Mal Alkohol trinkt.
So, ich denke, das ist nicht zu früh?
Nee,
Nee, okay.
das ist 45.
Cool.
Okay, my personal experience, I started with, I think the first time was when I was 8, my grandfather gave me a little bit of beer and then my grandmother comes, there you can do that, and more than, it was just a little like liquor from the amount of beer. And my first time was when I was 14. I was on a festival here in Germany, and then I drank for 1 liter of beer, and I was very drunk. But I think that's normal in this age. I think from 14 beer the first time is okay, and liquor and harder things maybe from 16, that's okay, that's normal, and I find it's okay. So in the US 21 it's a little bit too late, I think.
Yeah, I don't really know.
Okay, that's fine.
Like, I read an article and it said 14 to 15, but I don't really have a comment on that.
Yeah. So, do you think that 14 or 15 is too young?
No, as long as they don't get pregnant if they don't want to.
Probably 15.
And do you think that that's too young?
No.
Probably the same, about 15. I think it sort of varies, you know, sort of high school age for most people, I would imagine, somewhere in there.
Okay, and so do you think that that's too young or is that okay?
Again, I don't think it's really a problem.
Also ich finde es ab 16 in Ordnung. Viele machen es schon vorher, aber das denke ich, dass es auch... Also es kommt natürlich darauf an, wie man, also je nachdem wie reif man ist, aber ich finde 16 ist das perfekte Alter dazu eigentlich, weil ich glaube, davor ist man noch nicht so aufgeklärt.
I'd put that around the 18-year-old mark too, or
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think that's too young or is that... Okay.
depends on an individual situation. I really don't know.
I'd say probably the same area, 15 to 18.
So do you think that's too young?
I think that there's people that it would be too young for, and then some that could handle it at that age.
Don't know. Probably right around there too, I'd say like 17, 18, 19.
Okay, so do you think that that's too young or is that okay?
I think it's fine. I find it sort of more difficult to, not like, I just find it more difficult to embrace like 13, 14. But I think like, I don't know, it depends on the person. So I think that a lot of times 13, 14-year-olds aren't ready, but I wouldn't say that like all 16-year-olds aren't ready either. So I think it depends on, I think there's some 19-year-olds who are ready, and there's some 16-year-olds who are. So I think that it just depends on the person.
Gute Frage. Es wird ja immer weniger jetzt, also aber vielleicht 15 oder so.
Und ist es zu früh oder geht es?
Wie es momentan ist.
Für was?
Wie es momentan oder was ich gerade gesagt habe? Also mit 15.
Mit 15, ja.
Ja, ich denke mal mit 15 ist okay. Kommt halt natürlich auch wieder drauf an, aber. Jo.
Ja.
Das ist schwer. Ich finde, das kann man
Ja.
nicht sagen. Ich finde, das kommt auf die Person drauf an.
Ja.
Aber. Nee, das kann ich nicht sagen. Weil ich weiß es nicht.
Ja, stimmt.
Ich finde, das kommt auf die Person drauf an, ob du die richtige hast und so.
I think 16, 17. I think it's good. It's okay.
Like other drugs, no, I don't think so. And weed, a few, not my friends though, so I can't really.
Probably.
Oh, definitely. I think people at least experiment with, smoking weed, and I think a lot of it is because it's taboo, and you're not meant to do it, and you're sort of at that age where it's like, oh, I'm going to rebel against my parents and what they're telling me to do. I think that has a lot to do with it. It's more fun to be breaking the rules than what you're actually doing.
Ja, das glaube ich schon, weil das so ein Modetrend, sage ich jetzt mal, geworden ist. Und vor allem die Jungen, die alles ausprobieren, konsumieren das. Ich finde es aber auch nicht unbedingt so gut. Vielleicht ein paar Mal ausprobieren, aber die meisten machen es ja dann öfters.
Maybe not many, but enough.
Mhm.
A sizable amount.
Yeah, I think a good amount probably do.
Teenagers, or as in like any span between when you have the teen on it to like that's from 13 to 19.
Sure.
I don't know. When I was in high school, I was not like one of the cool kids, so I never was part of the like scene of people who would be drinking and drugs and having sex and stuff like that. So I don't have like the greatest knowledge of who is and who isn't. But my impression is that I wouldn't say like 13 and 14-year-olds I mean, my sister's 11, so the concept to me of like in 2 years she'll be like doing drugs is just like, I don't think so. But that could be like the ignorance of an older sibling wanting to be like, no, my sister would never do that. She's too little. She's a baby. But yeah, I don't think like 13 and 14-year-olds do, but I think probably getting into 16 to 19 is more common.
Ja, also in unserem Freundeskreis jetzt, also in meinem Freundeskreis jetzt eher weniger, beziehungsweise gar keine, kaum. Vielleicht ein bisschen Haschisch oder sowas konsumieren, vielleicht schon manche, aber jetzt nichts Härteres. Und ich denke mal, dass das auch hier nicht so der Fall ist. Also wenn man jetzt vielleicht nach Berlin oder sowas geht, in irgendwelche ärmeren Viertel, da kann das vielleicht schon eher sein, aber hier denke ich mal nicht.
Ja.
Ja.
Many here in Germany, many young teenagers do that. I think it's not good. I don't like it. I tried 3 times this marijuana and I didn't like it. It was not my. And I think it has to be prohibited and I don't like it. I have to say that.
Yeah.
So long as there's no harm involved, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see weed as particularly damaging. I mean, the most damage I've seen people do is because it's a crime to possess it. So, people tend to get in trouble with their parents when they're caught, but I don't think it's really a problem. I don't see it causing long-term damage like other Schedule 3 drugs.
Also bei Drogen und Alkohol ist das jetzt, glaube ich, das ist halt nicht so, ein bisschen ist vielleicht, also Drogen jetzt eher weniger, aber Alkohol ist vielleicht ein bisschen okay und bei Sex, gehört schon dazu. Ist klar, schon wichtig und richtig so.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that people choose to do and they largely don't harm others, though can.
I mean, I don't really have an issue with it. I mean, I think it could become a problem, but it all depends on the person, really.
I think it's okay to experiment. I don't know if I think it's okay to like do it habitually. I mean, I don't think it's okay to do it habitually in terms of drinking and drugs, because I think when you're younger, you think, oh, everything will be totally fine. If I drink, you know, I'm young, everything will go back to normal. But then you get into these like spirals of how is it affecting your coping mechanisms? How is it affecting your brain? How is it affecting your ability to function with other people? Just if you're so dependent on drinking or doing drugs, or if you're so interested in drinking and doing drugs other than things that maybe, you know, would be better for you to be focused on when you're in your teenage years.
Ja, ich fand die Frage schon witzig, als ich die das erste Mal gelesen habe. Es klingt so ein bisschen nach so einer Sekte oder so, die ja, nee, im Allgemeinen ist schon okay.
Cool, okay, cool.
Außer jetzt Drogen nicht unbedingt.
Ja.
Ja, in Maßen ist
Ja.
okay. Solange es nicht so viel ist.
Yes. No. Yes.
Yeah, I guess.
No and yes. To the first and second, respectively.
Sex and alcohol, yes. Drug abuse, not so much. You know, I have friends who will occasionally have a joint or something, but
Ja, ja schon. Also Drogen jetzt gar nicht. Bei uns nimmt eigentlich niemand Drogen. Aber Alkohol trinken ist schon ein großer Bestandteil und Sex auch, ja.
Not too much in my life, but my friends are to varying degrees affected and controlled by some of these things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it plays a very important role in my life. I mean, I drink, that's about it. But, I mean, I have sex, but, yeah, I mean, I don't think it plays a very important role in my life. Like, my life's not centered around it, but it's something that I do, so I guess it means something to me.
I mean, I didn't start drinking until I was like 20. So before that, I was first year. I've had a sort of weird relationship with drinking and drugs because my dad was an alcoholic and a drug addict. So for the longest time, I believed that one sip of alcohol or like one attempt or, you know, trying drugs would mean like everything would be over. I'd be immediately addicted. So I didn't do that first year, and I just didn't like the idea of not remembering an entire night. I didn't think that was cool. So the fact that a lot of people, when I was in first year, said, oh yeah, like last night I drank so much, I blacked out, I don't remember, and that was my biggest impression of what drinking was about. It wasn't about the potential like lessening of inhibitions or anything. It was about like getting so drunk you don't remember, and that just didn't appeal to me. And then I was an RA my second year of college. So then the third year I thought, okay, like, you know, I'm 20, I'm almost 21. And so I started to think, well, this could be interesting. And so I did really enjoy drinking. I've not really done that much with drugs. And so in my life, it's played a big role in a lot of my friends and family. When I turned 21, were very, very concerned about, now that I could purchase my own alcohol, how that would go in terms of this like family history of alcoholism. And so I have friends that are really into drinking, and so I sometimes, because of my history, I think, oh well, hopefully they won't go the way of alcoholism. But I don't think a lot of my friends are dependent or anything. I think they're just in college, want to have fun. So I think that there's some people I do know that are going in the direction of unhealthy drinking, and that includes adults I know and family members. So that does play a sort of a part, not just like the fun, recreational, but the fear of, ooh, it is unhealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think alcohol or sex is for me important, and for my friends, I don't have friends who are smoking weed. For me, it's not very important to smoke weed.
It's 16 years for wine and beer, and then 18 years for liquor.
So, do you think that that's right?
Yeah.
Yeah. what do you think it changes to have two different ages for alcohol?
I think the teenagers get used to alcohol a bit easier since they start off with like light alcohol and then get to the hard stuff later when they like already know their limit.
Yeah.
That.
21.
And do you think that that's correct?
Not particularly. I think it encourages a culture in which drinking is, well, obviously forbidden. And this leads to secrecy in its consumption, which leads to excessive consumption and uncontrolled consumption, which in turn leads to, well, addiction and, other problems associated with loss of control. You look at drunk driving statistics.
Well, in America it's 21. In England I think it's 18. Something. Yeah, I think it's 18.
Okay, so do you think that that's correct?
Yeah. No, I think 21's too old. I think you have the degree of mobility and freedom by the time you're 21 that everyone sort of does it anyways. You're in college at that point, and I mean, once you're in college, like you have upperclassmen friends who will just supply it to you. Like it sort of becomes a non-issue.
Also man darf so die schwächeren Sachen, so Bier und Wein ab 16 kaufen und dann den harten Alkohol wie Wodka ab 18.
Und dann findest du das angemessen? Warum oder warum nicht?
Also es ist natürlich praktisch, weil man natürlich auch als Jugendlicher gerne Alkohol trinkt, aber eigentlich ist es sinnlos, das so aufzuspalten, weil von Bier kann man sich genauso betrinken wie mit Wodka. Deshalb ist das, weiß ich nicht, ein bisschen unsinnig vielleicht.
Yeah, it's 21. And once upon a time was 18 in certain states.
So do you think that 21 is the right age, or?
It doesn't make sense to me because you can do a bunch of other things legally as an adult when you're 18, but drinking is 21.
As far as I know, it's 21.
Do you think that that's correct?
No, I think it should probably be 18. Just because there's a lot of other stuff that you can do when you're 18, like join the military and vote, so I don't see why the drinking age can't be 18.
21.
Do you think that that's correct? Why or why not?
I don't think it's correct. I mean, I understand, I don't know the exact reason why they did it, why they made it 21, and I assume it has something to do with death rates or something. I assume that there was a reason for it. I don't know what the reason was. And so I get why it is, but I don't think it makes sense. And I think the traditional argument is if you're legally considered adult, or if you could enlist yourself in the army, then why can you not drink? Like, why can somebody who's just enlisted, about to go and be on the front lines or whatever, why is it against the law for them to go buy themselves a beer for their going away party? So I definitely understand that argument, and I agree with that argument. And so to me it's like a two-sided thing, that I understand people who think that people who are considered adults should be able to drink, and then I understand that there's, I don't know what the real reason is, but that there's probably a personal public safety side to it.
Ja, das haben wir gerade schon gesagt, also Bier ab 16 und den Schnaps ab 18. Und ich finde das auch okay so.
Und warum?
Ja, also ich finde es gut, dass die Unterscheidung zwischen Bier und Schnaps einmal gibt, weil das ja schon ein ganz schöner Unterschied ist. Es gibt jetzt ein paar Sachen, die ich nicht ganz genau verstehe. Also es gibt irgendwelchen Alkohol, der trotzdem hochprozentig ist, den man dann trotzdem mit 16 kaufen darf oder so. Ich weiß es aber, ich kenne mich da auch nicht genau aus. Auf jeden Fall finde ich es aber okay, dass Bier ab 16 ist und das andere ab 18 ist schon auch richtig so. Aber ich glaube sowieso, dass sich da viele Leute oder kaum jemand dran hält. Aber
mit 16 Bier und Wein und mit 18 Hartalk, also Wodka,
Ja.
also Schnaps.
Und findest du das angemessen Oder?
Ist okay. Zählt eh, du kriegst mit 16 kriegst du auch schon Wodka.
From 16 I can buy beer here, 18 I can buy liquor, and I find it's perfect. And yes, because 16 is a good age, you know your body and you can test it with beer when you are 16. What do you, ja, ich weiß nicht, wie viel du verträgst. What's okay for you or when it's too much. And then with 18 you know this from the beer, and then you can try this liquor and maybe you have a experience with alcohol. So when I think in the US, it's not everyone buys it. Ist schwierig zu sagen. Everyone buys it before he's 21 and tests this. But I think if the people would just buy beer when 21 and then buy liquor at the same age, they would not get this experience, and they, yeah, it's schwierig. Yeah. It's hard to tell. Maybe they try with liquor, start with liquor, and that's I think very dangerous.
I think people would still start at 16 or 15 and just be more illegal.
Yeah. And what do you think if it was lower or if there wasn't a drinking age?
Chaos.
Higher, I mean, it would just get more ignored than it already is. And less punished, I think, than it already is. If it was lower, nothing immediately would happen, but I think we might see a change in the US drinking culture, in that, like, there's less, I guess, acceptance of drinking in the US than, like, I see in Europe. And, like, in Europe, every single restaurant I've been to serves some form of alcohol. And, like, it's normal. Everyone goes in there, everyone eats there, and people will have, beer with lunch or whatever. So I think that the creation of a culture in which, relatively responsible alcohol consumption is normal helps reduce rates of abuse. The same with drugs and so on, but that's a different issue.
Well, if it was higher, it would just exacerbate the current problem. I mean, you wouldn't change anything, you'd just increase the number of people breaking the law. If it was lower, I think, at least in America, I think you'd see people being more responsible with it. I think it would become much more, well, like living in Europe, it's much more commonplace. People just, you can have a casual drink, you don't have to drink to get drunk, and that's a lot of what you see, especially in college. I mean, everyone sort of, it's expensive, so they get large quantities of cheap alcohol, and it never ends well.
Oh Gott, also ich glaube, das würde jetzt nicht so viel ausmachen, weil wenn die Altersfreigabe runtergeht, würden es halt mehr kaufen, aber auch wenn sie höher geht, würden es immer noch viele kaufen, weil die meisten haben ältere Freunde, die den Alkohol kaufen, also spielt es eigentlich gar keine so große Rolle, die Altersfreigabe.
If it was higher, people would be outraged. If it was lowered, I think you would see the kind of desire to drink among younger teens kind of go down because of that forbidden fruit idea dies.
I don't think much would change if it was lower. I think there would be a lot less tickets as far as underage drinking goes. I think you would still have people that were like 15 or 16 though, getting alcohol and getting people to buy them alcohol. If it was higher, I'm sure that there would be a little bit of frustration among everybody.
I don't think anybody would let it get any higher, because I think people are right now, there's a lot of people who are not particularly content with 21 as it is. But I think that if people try to make it higher, I don't think it would fly. And then if it was lower, I think that the people who would be concerned are organizations, I don't remember what the exact name is, but the Moms Against Drunk Driving organizations that would be really concerned that the new generations that will be able to drink sooner wouldn't understand the significance of drinking and driving and the significance of where your limits are and things like that. So So I think that that would be the biggest uproar, would be between different groups who think, well, they're considered adults at 18, if that was to be what the new age is. And then there's the group that says, but we've been raising people at 21 for so long, we don't really know if 18-year-olds can handle themselves with this responsibility. So.
Was sich ändern würde, meinst du? Ja, es würden halt, denke ich mal, noch mehr Leute sich den Alkohol von irgendwelchen älteren Freunden oder sonst wem kaufen lassen. Und ich denke, es hat keinen Sinn, den jetzt bei sowas wie Bier oder so nach oben zu schrauben. Weil es hält sich ja dann doch keiner dran. Und es ist jetzt auch nicht so was Heftiges, wo man sagen sollte, okay, da muss man erst erwachsen für sein. Also, das ist schon okay.
Gar nichts. So viel Alkohol zu trinken.
Yeah, so
Ich glaube, es kann zur Erfahrung, also ich glaube, ich weiß es nicht. Also es ist, glaube ich, egal, du kriegst es so oder so, egal wie alt du bist, wenn du ältere Freunde hast, die haben mir auch alles gekauft, wo ich erst 15, 16 war.
ja.
Und außerdem, ich glaube, macht man auch seine Erfahrungen damit.
Politician would do this because then he could end his career here in Bavaria. In Germany, many people would say that's good and many people would say that's bad. I don't know. But I think that not at the age when people start to drink alcohol or test it, this would not change.
Not legal.
Yeah, so do you agree with that or no? Do you think it should be legal?
It could be. It's legal in the Netherlands for their citizens.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, I think it works there pretty well, actually. So, it could be in Germany too, but I don't really mind.
Which part?
Is weed legal in your country?
It is not federally legal.
Okay.
It is a restricted substance.
And do you think that that's a correct legality?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't see any particular harm resulting from its consumption.
No, I don't think it should be classed as the class of drug it is. I mean, it's just not. It has no long-term effects. Smoking a cigarette causes more damage, and that's perfectly legal. I think it makes financial sense to legalize it, and then it can be taxed just like tobacco, and you'd have another growing trade and industry, and that, I mean, being high is no different on weed compared to like the buzz you get from smoking cigarettes. It's
Ja, das finde ich schon gut, dass es verboten ist, weil eben es sehr ungesund ist und weil es auch blöd macht, wenn man es zu oft konsumiert. Aber es halten sich ja nicht so viele dran, da sollte man schon strenger sein.
I don't think so. It doesn't seem to be dangerous, but habitual, I guess. So in a way, it can be bad for you, but it's not nearly the same as like cocaine and heroin and Molly and K2 and all these other dangerous things.
Yeah.
So I don't think it should be a criminal like activity at all.
No, I don't necessarily agree with it. I mean, I'm not a big weed person myself, so I really don't have that much invested into it, but I think that it being illegal has caused more problems than helped.
I mean, right now it's sort of changing. I think we have like 2 or 3, as of like yesterday, that these states that allow 4. There's 4 that allow marijuana. I don't really know what the stipulations are. And I think that with the fact that, to my knowledge, marijuana is not any more dangerous than cigarettes are, that it seems sort of, I can understand, and I think this was true for my dad, who was a drug addict, that marijuana can lead to other drugs that they call it like the gateway drug. But I think alcohol can be the exact same way, because he was an alcoholic too. I think if it was marijuana was just as legal as alcohol, I don't think the illegality of it stopped anything.
Ja, das ist ja irgendwie ganz komisch. Also man darf ja in Deutschland, darfst du ja Haschisch konsumieren, aber nicht besitzen.
Echt?
Ja, das heißt also, du machst dich strafbar, wenn du es bei dir hast, aber wenn du es rauchst an sich, dann ist es nicht strafbar. Das heißt also, wenn so wie ich das verstehe, wenn dir jemand jetzt irgendeinen Joint oder so hinhält und du ziehst einmal dran und dann nimmt dir wieder weg, dann wäre es ja legal. Naja, aber was soll ich da jetzt nochmal zu sagen, ob ich das richtig finde oder?
Es ist, denkst du, dass Haschisch legal sein sollen?
Achso, na, ich finde es schon ganz okay, wie es jetzt ist. Also ich rauche kein Haschisch oder so und mir ist es im Grunde wurscht. Ich finde es okay, dass es im Grunde verboten ist und muss jetzt ja auch nicht sein. Ich meine, es gibt ja Alkohol und Zigaretten.
Ja, es ist illegal hier?
Ja.
So,
Finde ich schon.
denkst du, dass es gut ist, oder?
Ist gut, finde ich, dass es illegal ist.
Ja?
Ja.
Warum?
Weil es nicht gut ist, einfach. Also ich meine, ich habe nichts gegen Kiffen und so, aber es ist das, manche Leute machen es zu viel oft und vor allem zu jung.
I think it's okay because I think the drugs, I know people from my class or from my work who take this shit every day and I know how they changed, and I think it's okay. When you smoke cigarettes you will die in 40 years maybe, or you will not die, but it's not this, the character is not changing very much. But if I think marijuana or hashish, the character changes extremely fast and the people who take it do not notice it. So I think it's perfect and it has to be prohibited.
I think it will work, and I think like less people have to like get it illegally and like do weird stuff with it. So just like all the people who are like really addicted to it can just like get their amount of weed they need and then be okay.
There'd be a lot more revenue for the state.
Okay.
And, well, there might be an effect on crime rates, but I don't see a huge result one way or the other. It's hard to predict.
I mean, I think you would see a lot more of it, and so people would think it's more prevalent, but I think that's just a byproduct of it being illegal, and so it goes on behind the scenes.
Das weiß ich jetzt gar nicht so genau, aber ich denke, dass es wahrscheinlich mehr Leute ausprobieren würden, weil ja viele eben davor auch Angst haben, weil es illegal ist und dass der Konsum dann vielleicht schon steigen könnte. Ja, das fände ich jetzt, also ich bin da, ja, ich fände es aber jetzt, ich bin da eher neutral, sagen wir es so.
Well, the same thing probably would happen, that the idea of smoking weed would become kind of normal, and that forbidden fruit idea would die. And I'm sure big corporations would get in on marijuana.
I think kind of the same thing with alcohol. You'd see a lot less, arrest and tickets for involving marijuana. I mean, it would save people a lot of money.
I think there's a lot of laws that involve drugs and that are just, I think they're pretty racist and classist, so I think drug laws, we have to reevaluate the way that we look at drug laws and the way that we talk about criminalization, and so I think that right now we have a really big prison problem, and taking away the criminalization of pot, which is not, to me, any worse than drinking and smoking cigarettes. I think that it would be an interesting conversation for our country to have around what are we going to do now that we don't have this law that's catching so many people and putting them in the prison system that don't need to be there.
Also ich denke mal, dass es dann viel mehr machen würden.
Ja.
Also es ist zwar, wenn wenn man das haben will, dann ist es nicht so schwer, da dran zu kommen, weil es immer jemanden gibt, der dir das verkauft, aber man kann sich es auch nicht irgendwo am Automaten oder im Supermarkt oder so kaufen, also das ist nicht ganz so einfach, aber ich denke mal, dass es dann viel mehr machen würden.
Dass aber noch mehr Jugendliche damit anfangen würden zu
Okay.
kaufen.
Yeah, many junkies, or I think it has something. There is pro and contra. So good is that the illegal black market is not anymore. There's no market for this, and it's maybe less dangerous to take it because it's controlled. That the quality is good and that is not, I know we say strict in Germany, that there's nothing, anything other in it. So, but I think more people will consume it. You can see this in the Netherlands where you can buy it. I think this is not, the relation is not good enough that you can yeah.
It's 18.
It is 18.
Yeah.
So do you think that's right?
Yeah, I think.
It varies from state to state. In Georgia, where I live, it's 16, with Romeo and Juliet laws allowing for, I think, a 3-year difference under 18. Nationwide, it's mostly 18, with some states going for 16, and most states having under 18 2 or 3 year difference rules.
Okay, so do you think that that's correct? For
Yeah.
your state
I
specifically?
mean, well, for my state, I don't really see a problem with it.
I think it's 16.
In your state?
Oh, back home. I think it's 16.
Okay. So do you think that that's correct?
I don't really think it's a problem so much. I mean, it's a problem when you get sort of those outside cases, you know, like someone way older who's predatory, but I think that's, the people doing that don't really have a problem with breaking the law anyways. Yeah, I mean, at least, you know, when you're that age, your friends are all the same age as you, so it's not really an issue.
Okay, also mit dem Sex, das ist man, glaube ich, ab 14 darf man das, glaube ich, aber die Person, mit der du es hast, darf nicht älter als 18 sein. Also ist das von beiden Seiten so. Und volljährig, so legal, dass man handlungsfähig, geschäftsfähig ist, ist man so eigentlich ab 18.
It varies by state, but I've heard low numbers like 15 and up to 18.
Okay.
I don't, it's hard to tell.
So do you think that it's right to have all those different ages, or?
I think it reflects the complexity of like sex, just because every situation's different, every person's got a different maturity level.
Well, I'm pretty sure it differs from state to state, but I'm almost 100% positive it's 16 in North Carolina. So, but that's with like stipulations. I think the age of, you can be a consenting adult when you're 16, but there's like stipulations as far as like somebody can't be like 3 years older than you or something like that. I mean, if you consent, it's, I guess you can do it, but it can still be considered statutory rape, I'm not sure.
So, what do you think about that law?
I mean, I think that it's probably pretty useful. I mean, I've never really had to worry about it. I try to kind of be safe on my own end. That way I don't have to run into problems like that. And I've always dated girls my age or older, so.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the age of consent. Is it 18?
Varies state to state.
Oh. Okay.
So do you think should be 18 overall, or should it be different state to state, or?
I mean, I don't really particularly enjoy state to state stuff. State politics is not my favorite, but mostly because I don't understand really how much teenagers vary from state to state. Like, I don't really know if one state has 18 and the one next to it has 17, like what makes a difference between those two states in terms of like the ability for those kids to make those decisions about themselves. And I don't know how often the consent age is policed, is checked. I don't know. And I don't really know what the stipulations on that are either, in terms of if you're 18 but your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever is 17, then what does that mean? So I think that the variation is just really confusing. I think the concept of a consent age is something that makes sense, but I think it's something that also carries so much gray area that people don't even really understand. I mean, I don't even know what the age was, and I don't entirely understand what it means for somebody to be below the age of consent most of the time. I understand when people totally validly make the claim that they could not consent because they're below the age of consent, but I'm not sure how it looks for people who are below the age of consent and did consent to feel like, oh, they say that I'm not allowed to be in charge of that decision.
Achso, okay. Ja, also ab 18 ist man ja volljährig.
Mhm.
Und ja, ich denke mal, das ist okay. Also ich wüsste jetzt auch nicht, also ich habe da nicht genug Erfahrung oder Ahnung, um da irgendwie zu behaupten, das wäre anders besser. Deswegen denke ich schon, dass mit 18 okay ist. Also ja. Hm?
Und so.
Nee, in Deutschland ist es 14.
14.
Es gibt dann nur irgendwie so eine Regelung. Ich glaube, dass wenn der eine Partner über 18 ist und der andere 14, dann ist es verboten. Aber ich bin mir da auch nicht ganz sicher.
Mit 18 und mit 21 dann komplett.
Ja. Okay.
Also vom Strafgesetz her.
So, mit 18 kannst du...
Mit 18 kann ich Geschäfte abschließen und so weiter und Alkohol kaufen, alleine Auto fahren. Aber mit 21 bist du voll bestrafbar, also
okay.
voll so Recht.
Glaubst du, dass das ist angemessen?
Ich finde, dass man mit 18 auch komplett bestraft werden sollte.
Auch was?
Also, dass man, also in Deutschland ist es so, wenn du mit 18 Verbrechen begehst, dann kommst du noch in das Jugendstrafgesetz und wirst nicht so hart bestraft als mit 21. Und ich finde, dass man schon mit 18 genauso hart bestraft werden kann als mit 21. Weil viele dann leicht davon kommen vor vielen Sachen.
Ja.
Vor Schlägereien oder so, die müssen dann einfach nur ein paar Arbeitsstunden machen und da finde ich schon besser, wenn man mit 18 dann voll bestraft werden kann.
Yeah, here in Germany it depends on how old is your partner and how old are you. So, but the most things. So in the casino, go in the casino, play roulette, you can do... Normally 18 is the age where you can buy nearly everything and where you can do nearly everything. The only thing I know that you cannot do with 18 is going in the casino and play roulette, but maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, I think it's like that. And yeah, sex depends on how old your partner is. So when you are 16, you are allowed to have sex, but not with a person who is 14. And if you are 15, you are allowed to have sex, but not with a person who is 13. So it depends on the relation between the two persons who do that. And yes, I think it's okay. The laws are okay for this. Yeah. Maybe voting should be allowed with 17 for the elections. I don't know, a little bit, because I think the people, maybe more young people would interest for this.
I think, like, personally, I wouldn't start thinking about politics and, like, my country as soon as I do now. Since I'm gonna be going up soon.
Yes. So what do you think if the age of consent was lower? What would happen?
Well, same chaos.
Same chaos?
I mean, 18 is young compared to America,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah. Well, you know,
18's when you're considered an adult in the U.S. too.
Yeah, but can you vote?
Mhm.
Really?
Mhm.
So the only thing that you can't do is like drink and go
Mhm.
to clubs, casinos, whatever.
Yep.
Okay, that's weird. So you're like actually grown up, but you aren't. Yeah. Okay, I don't know if I like that.
Higher would, I think, be a problem depending on enforcement, because there would undoubtedly be cases where it's, or whenever it's enforced in an abusive manner, and that'll create issues. But otherwise, it would just be ignored. Lower, I mean, it's difficult to get lower without running into consent and presence of mind issues.
I don't think it would change anything unless it was drastically higher, and then it would just, you would, effectively you would have people breaking the law and just would never be reported or anything, because it's, people would be like, well, that's silly.
Für beide Dinge.
Oh. Also, wegen dem Sex, das glaube ich, das ist bei uns jetzt nicht so streng. Das wäre, glaube ich, völlig egal, weil wenn man es machen will, macht man es so oder so. Und mit der Volljährigkeit, ich glaube, da wird es viele Proteste geben, ehrlich gesagt, weil mit 18 darf man ja auch wählen gehen und viele wollen ja auch wählen, und wenn sich das jetzt meinetwegen noch weiter nach hinten raus verschieben würde, glaube ich, wären da viele mit unzufrieden. Und weiter nach vorne würde ich aber auch nicht gut finden, weil man einfach noch zu unreif ist und zu kindlich. Also finde ich 18 schon ganz gut.
I don't really think that the age of consent really is something that's enforced the same way as drugs and alcohol are.
Mhm.
So maybe there wouldn't be much changed if it was higher or lower.
I think if it was raised, it would probably cause more problems than we already have involving issues around that. If it was lowered, I mean, I think America would definitely have a problem with it, just because I think a lot of America is pretty set in their ways of, I think even when you're 16, it's still kind of frowned upon to have sex at that age, and especially, if you're doing it with an 18-year-old or something, parents normally have an issue with it on average. So I think if it was lowered, it would just cause a pretty big issue among parents in America.
So you're talking about 17, 18, so what if it was overall 14 or 15 or overall 21?
21, I think, would be kind of ridiculous. Just because if you're 21, I feel like there's so much of your life that has happened that I'm not saying everybody knows themselves at 21, but I feel like, I'm 21 and I'm almost done with college, and if I thought that somebody was saying, oh, you don't know yourself enough to know if you consent, I'd be like, but I've gone through college. I just graduated. Like, now you expect me to go into the world or go into grad school, and if you're saying I can't make that decision for myself, why are you thinking I can make big decisions like what major, or what career direction, or what to do after college? So I think 21 would be weird, but 13 and 14, I think that's one of those things where people have a really big visceral reaction to the idea of like a 13-year-old having sex. They think, oh, that is a young kid, they don't know what they're doing, they don't know what the consequences are. And I think to a degree that's true, but I don't know if that's because their age. I don't know if that's because the way that school systems teach about sex. Like, I don't think that school systems teach about sex in a way that says, oh, these are the consequences that could realistically happen at 13 and 14. I just am not entirely, when I was 13, that definitely was not taught. I did not have any of that information. So there's the question of maturity, and then there's the question of information. So if the kids don't have the information, then you don't really know, can they do informed consent? How informed are they? And then if they have that information, you have to question, are they mature enough to use that information, to understand, oh, if I don't use a condom, or if I am not safe in my sex, then I may have unwanted pregnancy or STD or STI or something like that. So I'm not sure, I mean, I'm not totally versed on how mature 13 or 14-year-olds are, but I'm not sure if they would be able to comprehend, like you may catch something that will affect you for the rest of your life.
Ja. Also ich denke mal, wenn man die jetzt runtersetzen würde auf 16 zum Beispiel oder 17 oder noch jünger, dann wäre das keine gute Idee, weil gut, wenn man volljährig ist, hat man dann doch in manchen Fällen mehr Verantwortung zu tragen. Also so blöd wie das jetzt auch klingt, so wie aus dem so schulmeisterlich, aber man hat dann doch mehr Verantwortung zu tragen und muss Entscheidungen treffen, die man vielleicht jetzt, die vielleicht auch mit 18 schon nicht so ganz einfach sind. Und naja, aber wenn man es jetzt raufsetzen würde mit 21, wäre es vielleicht auch schon ein bisschen zu spät. Also ich meine, kann ich schwer sagen.
So.
Ich finde 18 ist ja schon recht jung.
Ja,
Jünger soll es nicht mehr werden.
I don't know. So if somebody with 16 would be volljährig, that would cause much of problems because they have not this, yeah, they don't have this, I don't know how to say, the brain is not at this stage where you can do it, where you can choose your own decisions, and yeah, and older is stupid because with 18 I think the most people are yeah, they are grown up, and at the law, for example, if you are under 21, you are normally at the law you are volljährig, but if you do something bad, or the lawyer can say your mind is not old enough, you are over 18, but the punishment I say your mind is not good enough, so I punish you like you would be 17, but you are 19. This goes until 21, so there is a little bit
Grace period.
space for these things. I think it's perfect like it is.
I don't really know since the systems are so different.
Yeah.
Yeah, can't really say anything about that. I mean, Germany is pretty healthy. We don't have that many issues with like drugs and alcohol and all that. I mean, we have few. Don't deny it, but it's like not a real problem.
Yeah. Do you think film kind of adds to the image that you might have of the US when it comes to that kind of stuff? Like
Drinking and all that.
Like, do you think that your opinion of the US on things like taking drugs or having sex or drinking alcohol, do you think your idea of that comes mainly from what you know or what you watch on TV?
Like, for me, it's kind of hard to draw the difference since I've been to the US for a long time, like 6 months. So, yeah, I mean, you see lots of stuff on TV, but when you get to the US, you know it's like not that exact way.
In regards to sex or drugs or alcohol or any of the above, I think we've got more dangerous norms with regard to alcohol. I'm not sure with regard to drugs because I haven't seen much of Germany in that respect. I certainly don't agree with our policies with respect to drugs, and I think they're pretty dangerous, but I'm not sure how they compare to Germany's. Sex, I don't know, they're mostly okay, although I think they've got some issues. Not relating to age and consent, more just relating to the culture surrounding it.
I would hazard a guess and say England and America are very similar in sort of the dangers of drinking and sex. I mean, it's England, especially the sort of university, it's a very big binge drinking culture. So you get people consuming vast amounts of alcohol very rapidly, and then, you know, one thing leads to another, and so I think you get a lot of bad situations that just shouldn't really happen, but happen because, well.
Wenn ich jetzt mal so, ich bin mir nicht ganz sicher, weil bei uns ist ja wirklich, dass man schon wirklich früh Alkohol kaufen kann und so, wenn ich da jetzt mit Amerika vergleiche, deshalb 21 und auch ist schon so, oder?
Ja.
Oder England zumindest, das ist ziemlich streng. Also ich finde das eigentlich, ich finde es schon ganz gut, aber das könnte man hier nicht wirklich durchsetzen, glaube ich. Also bei uns ist es schon, es ist gut, aber es ist natürlich auch ein bisschen gefährlich, weil viele Jugendliche eben da über die Stränge schlagen.
That's a tough question. So the drinking age here, I know, is lower for a lot of places.
Yeah, it's
And that seems to like form this kind of healthier idea of what alcohol is, and allows families to kind of teach kids how to drink responsibly, or allow them to figure it out on by themselves. As far as the sex thing, I guess it's the same, I suppose, here as it is there. I really haven't had that much time to understand that aspect of the culture. And as far as weed, I really don't know. I understand it's probably illegal here in a very similar way it is back stateside.
I mean, this is kind of just grasping for straws, but I don't know. I mean, I think that there's some things in America that aren't necessarily bad things. I think we fearmonger a lot in America and kind of try to scare our kids away from it. I feel like in Germany, they're pretty open about it, and I think that can be a good thing. But I definitely feel like in Germany it's still kind of frowned upon to have sex at 14. I'm pretty sure that's the age of consent here. So I think that I don't think one's healthier than the other. I think they each have their problems that are very different from each other.
I mean, I don't know that much about the drug scene in Germany, but in terms of the drinking scene, it seems really interesting that they can drink younger, and that there's this distinction between drinking things like beer and drinking hard liquors, that the age for drinking beer is different from the age, and I think that's an interesting sort of gradual change, that you can turn 16 and you can have some beer, but you have to wait till you're 18, and then you can go into the realm of shots and hard liquor and stuff like that. Because it's definitely, I mean, in the United States, you hit 21 and you can do pretty much whatever. So it's definitely, I think, you have to learn your limits that way. And I'm not saying that people who are underage aren't drinking what they're not supposed to be drinking. But I think the idea is interesting, that you learn a little bit about your tolerance level, and then you can go farther into things that are a little bit more dangerous. So I also think that the sort of the attitude of drinking beer and stuff like that as being just the same as drinking soda or whatever at dinner, I think that's really interesting, because I think the point of view, just from my experience of drinking just a beer at dinner, is that you're drinking alcohol. And I think that it's interesting that in Germany you're drinking alcohol, but you're just drinking a beer, and you know that that's your limit is, or it's not even really a limit, it's just that that's what you're just going to drink for dinner, and that it's not going to get too out of hand. So I think the idea of making alcohol seem just everyday is an interesting difference between the United States and Germany.
Weiß ich nicht. Also gut, in Deutschland, das sieht ja für Leute, die nicht aus Deutschland kommen, sieht es immer so aus mit Oktoberfest und Bier saufen und so und immer Alkohol. Denke ich schon, man kriegt es ja leichter als in Amerika, aber also ist es vielleicht auch ungesünder hier zu leben, ich weiß es nicht.
weiß nicht, ich war noch nie in Amerika, deswegen
Ja.
kann ich nicht sagen.
Ja.
Aber
Was wir
ja,
von
ich weiß-
Filmen vielleicht gehört haben.
man kann ja mit 16 Auto fahren, oder?
Ja.
Alleine? Okay. Ja, das würde ich mir zum Beispiel noch nicht zutrauen, mit 16 alleine hier Auto zu fahren.
Ja.
Aber du kriegst erst mit 21 Alkohol, oder?
Mhm.
Aber du kannst es auch schon vorher bekommen, oder wahrscheinlich?
Ja.
Ja, eben deswegen glaube ich, ist es ziemlich egal.
Ja, stimmt.
Die
So.
nehmen ja genauso Drogen und
Ja,
saufen
stimmt.
da drüben.
Ja, es ist fast die gleiche wie hier, finde ich.
Eben, deswegen glaube ich, ist es ziemlich egal, wann die das festlegen, weil es...
So when I was in the US, I noticed that children are very much more geschützt, safe.
Oh.
They look after their children much more than here in Germany. So I was 10 years old and we were on a boat and I wanted to go alone to the toilet and the guy at the toilet said, "Where are your parents?" And there was a speech in the whole boat. Parents have to watch after their children. So that's my experience from the US. You are much longer a child. So when my sister was 16, she got sometimes so a little bit a drawing book or so. If you would do this in Germany, or she was asked if she wants to have a stamp on her hand at the museum, if you ask this in Germany, the people would laugh at you. So I don't know. I think, but the older the grown-ups are not geschützt, safe in the US. Like here in Germany, the parents are. So you can drive on a motorcycle without a helmet in many states, or isn't it like that? I don't know. I noticed that many people do this, and yeah, and you can. Yeah, the films are much more brutal here in Germany. There are cutted versions of your films because they say it's and teenagers can play brutal games much more. I think you can say it's healthier or safer there or not. It depends on which thing you are looking at, I think. I can say it.
Since I guess we don't have that many teenage pregnancies, it's rather safe.
It varies from state to state depending on the existence of abstinence-only education programs.
Yes.
I think it varies. I think the vast majority of teenagers are careful because most of them understand the consequences of what they're doing. But you always see the people who don't understand the consequences. You can't tell someone who's been having safe sex for ages, but you see the girl who's gotten pregnant in middle school, and that's a pretty dead giveaway.
Definitely.
So I think it's more a thing of what you see.
Das weiß ich gar nicht, aber ich glaube, dass viele, vor allem die Frühsex haben, eher ungeschützten Sex haben. Also dass es mehr Ungeschützte gibt, weil die nicht gut genug aufgeklärt sind oder weil sie betrunken sind und das dann einfach nicht beachten. Deshalb, oder weil sie einfach denken, ja, ich kann ja eh nicht schwanger werden. Deshalb glaube ich, dass das da eher mehr ungeschützt machen.
Hiding it is kind of what makes it unsafe, I suppose. So they're more prone to mess up if they're trying to not alert anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And they might not have the same resources to get like birth control or other contraceptive methods like condoms and spermicide, whatever.
This is in the States, you said?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that probably 50-50 maybe. I think a lot of kids aren't safe because they're kind of embarrassed by the whole idea of going into a gas station and buying condoms, or just kind of, it goes back to that culture of kind of scaring kids away from it. But I think it's getting better. I think that there's improvements on it.
I don't know. I really don't have much knowledge of other people's sex lives because not until I got to college, and then we didn't really talk about it until I was like 18, 19, so my knowledge of 13 to 17 is a little shaky. But I think that also really depends on where you come from, what your family's like, what your friends are like, because I think that sometimes one of those three, where you come from, family or friends, can fill in. So if your family and where you come from doesn't talk about it, but your friend knows a lot from their parents or whatever, then that can kind of fill in for it. So I don't know. In terms of safe sex, it really depends on how good people are at teaching about it. And I think that really the people who are taking on that responsibility aren't schools or community areas usually around schools and around young kids' lives, and it's not usually parents. I think it's usually the friends, or right now it's probably the internet that teaches you about it. So it's sort of a scary thought to think that so many people have the potential to never be taught about what safe sex is like until too late, because people aren't teaching about it, or because they don't have friends that know about it, and their friends' parents don't talk about it, and they don't really go onto that parts of the internet, or they don't have access to it, which makes sense. But when you have all of those factors coming together of no knowledge whatsoever, it's sort of a who's supposed to teach people? And if we don't have any outlets to teach people, then it's going to result in unsafe sex.
Ja, weiß nicht. Ich würde eher mal sagen geschützt. Aber, also weil mittlerweile kriegt man das ja in der Schule und auch so mit, aber es gibt halt immer ein paar Asoziale, die sowas nicht mitbekommen.
Ich kann es ja für mich sagen, aber ich glaube, das... Ja gut, ich glaube, wenn Jungs betrunken sind, dass sie da eher nicht so drauf achten, aber im Großen und Ganzen.
Ja, stimmt. So denkst du, dass du hast mehr aufgehört, ob Leute nicht so nicht geschützt sind, oder?
Ja, ich glaube schon, dass Leute darauf achten. Ich weiß nicht.
Ja.
Auf geschützten Sex, ich glaube,
ja.
Ich hoffe es.
Ja. Wir können mehr.
Zumindest ich für meinen Teil schon, also das kann ich mal sagen.
I don't know. I simply don't know. I don't know. Maybe the ones who are, I don't want to say asozial, they have this and they have children with 18. It's their problem. I don't know. Many people probably have this, but I think, yeah. I don't know.
Actually, I didn't really learn anything about it. I just heard don't do it till you're 16 and it's legal. And I just figured it out myself then.
About the existence of it? Or just
How to behave with alcohol.
I don't know. It's not an explicit learning process so much as it is, I guess, a process of acculturation. So it's very much, I guess, mimicry. And so I couldn't pinpoint a specific place where I learned like what is normal for alcohol consumption.
Drinking, my parents were pretty open with it. They would invite me to have a glass of wine with them for dinner sometimes. And it was very much, this is responsible drinking. They'd always have, a glass of wine or something at the end of the day. And it was always very casual. I think I've seen them actually drunk about once, and that was when I was 21. So I think they did a very good job about sort of teaching me responsible conduct and teaching me that just because I had been drinking doesn't mean it wasn't an excuse for my actions. That's definitely a problem I see here in England. My flatmates destroyed a wall in our house, and their excuse was, oh, we were drunk. And that's just not an excuse.
Also meine Eltern haben gesagt, ich soll nicht so übertreiben, weil es immer so ungesund ist und weil man davon dick wird und bla bla bla, die Sachen eben. Und von meinen Freunden habe ich jetzt eher so das gehört, ja, trink doch mit uns ein oder so, die sind jetzt nicht so erzieherisch. Ja, aber ich habe von beiden Seiten das eben gehört mit dem Alkohol.
Drinking my parents drink, so I've known pretty much all my life what alcohol is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only been really over here that I've actually had some myself.
I didn't really have to learn about it. It was just kind of, in America, you're kind of born into just seeing it all around you. But my dad, he drank when I was younger, but he stopped. I think my mom kind of, she never really like sheltered us from it, but she definitely, I think my dad had some issues with it in the past. So I think she was more afraid that we were going to like kind of inherit that, those problems. So she definitely like didn't allow us to drink in the house. Like I had friends in high school, like when they turned 16 or 17, they could have a beer at their house and stuff. So it definitely wasn't condoned, but my mom definitely was open about telling us, you know, hey, if you drink, don't drive. You know, if you go to a party and drink, just call me, I'll come pick you up. So I don't think that there was really much fear about it. So we were kind of sheltered, but kind of not from it. So I think it was kind of a good combination. Yeah.
About drinking. I mean, I grew up knowing that my dad was an alcoholic, so I'd been always talked to about what that meant. And he went to prison, so that was an extension of his drug addiction. So I had always been talked to about drinking and how dangerous it can be. But my stepdad's could be arguably could be called functioning alcoholic, and so he drinks at least 30, 40 beers a week. And so it's like when he gets home, he drinks and drinks and drinks, and then goes to work the next day, and then when he gets home, he drinks and drinks and drinks. So I think my knowledge of alcohol has been really impacted by family holidays, in which a lot of the times my mom or my aunt or somebody gets really drunk. So my knowledge of drinking was not moderate. My knowledge of drinking was alcoholic, or somebody saying something really inappropriate at a family holiday because they don't know how to hold themselves back because they've been drinking too much. So my growing up knowledge of drinking was not moderate. It was, this is a scary thing, don't do anything with it, like stay away.
Ja, so viel hat man darüber, glaube ich, nicht geredet. Also ein paar Mal hat der Hanno zum Beispiel erzählt, dass er irgendwie es nicht verstehen kann, wenn wir irgendwie allzu viel Alkohol trinken, weil das so scheiße ist und es macht ja keinen Spaß und bla bla. Aber im Grunde wirklich viel drüber habe ich mit meinen Eltern nicht über das Thema geredet. Also ich habe es halt ein paar Mal ausprobiert und dann am nächsten Tag, wenn ich halt irgendwie verkatert war oder so, dann haben sie halt gesagt, ja, ich habe es dir gesagt und so, aber viel mehr wurde darüber echt nicht geredet.
Also eigentlich nicht viel. Also meine Eltern haben mir recht viel Vertrauen in mich und verbieten mir das auch gar nicht oder so. Die gehen da recht locker um mit, weil sie wissen, dass ich eh nicht so jedes Wochenende mich voll zusauge.
Und hast du alles von sie und dann Alkohol getrunken oder von wem hast du davon erfahren?
Ja, von Freunden eigentlich. Fängt man an.
Ältere Freundin oder?
Hä?
Ältere Freundin?
Nee, das erste Mal so richtig getrunken habe ich mit Gleichaltrigen, aber später dann natürlich immer mit Älteren eigentlich. Also hier sind ja alle älter als ich.
Ja.
By my sister. My parents said it's bad and do not drink it. So I wanted to try it, my father said no. So my sister told me about it and yeah.
I didn't really learn about them, but it's not an issue to me. Like, I don't take drugs.
No, I honestly couldn't source that. Like, I'm sure it was a while ago, but I don't know where I first learned that it was a thing or what it was.
Junkies. To my knowledge, my parents don't know that I've ever consumed drugs. I have smoked marijuana, and that's it. I'm curious about other things, but I'm also intelligent enough to not to realize the dangers of taking it any further, and so down that would.
Okay, also meine Eltern haben mir gesagt, ich soll niemals Drogen nehmen, weil die eben sehr ungesund sind. Vor allem die modernen Drogen, diese Synthetikdrogen, die halt so hergestellt wurden im Ausland, weil die halt eben besonders gefährlich sind, schon nach der ersten Einnahme. Und von meinen ganzen Freunden, die sagen auch alle, dass Drogen scheiße sind und dass man da die Finger weglassen soll. Ja, das höre ich eigentlich überall.
I guess the drug thing, my parents smoke cigarettes, which isn't like a drug, but it's nicotine and it's addictive. And so I kind of have a knowledge of drugs through cigarettes, and they've told me about other things. I've learned stuff in school. Yeah.
Pretty much, as far as drugs go, it's kind of the same thing with drinking. They told me that I was going to encounter it, and it's going to be pretty much a part of life in high school and past that. And, they kind of left it up to me to make the decision on what I was going to do, but they definitely frowned upon it. But I don't think that they really knew they couldn't do anything to keep me away from it. I was going to do it if I wanted to. I think they just kind of told me to, really think about it before I made any decisions like that.
I sort of learned about drugs in sort of like a trickly method. There was no like, okay, so this is this kind of drug and this is this kind of drug, and one of them is way more addictive than another, or one of them is slightly more or way more strong in its impact than another. And so a lot of times, my stepdad is a game detective, so he would talk to me about drugs in sort of a weird, flippant way, and being like, oh, this is what a disco biscuit is, or whatever. And then I would learn that my dad had Hep C or something from sharing straws and not knowing what that meant, and then gradually figuring out what that meant. And learning from my mom about times when she came to pick me up from staying with him, and there'd be tin foil around in certain ways, and not knowing what that meant either, but knowing it was bad. So a lot of times when I learned about drugs, it was in a sort of criminal way.
Ja, Drogen, ja, ist schon ein bisschen was anderes. Also da haben sie dann schon was erzählt, vor allem irgendwelche Horrorgeschichten oder sowas. Und dass man das eben bloß nicht machen soll und so weiter, aber jetzt so, ich kann mich nicht erinnern, dass wir da so wirklich ausführlich drüber jetzt auch geredet haben, also ich denke mal so das Nötigste.
Oder etwas.
Gar nichts, weil das bei uns nicht relevant ist.
My parents, they warned me about it, but they didn't thought that I would take it. And yeah, the first really contact I had with 17, 16, and then I noticed, and then I had in the class this guy who takes it every day, and then I got to do with it. But for me it was clear, I tried it 1 time or 2 times, and after the 3rd time I said I was sick and feeling bad, and I said no.
I don't know how it is in America, but in Germany you learn every 2 years or 3 years you have a biology class. You learn about sex and what happens and what your parents did, all that. So I rather learned it at school than from my parents.
We had, I guess, a sex education thing in middle school, which I think I slept through because it was boring. I don't know. With none of these things, there's not, most of the time, an explicit educational process. It's, you hear other people talking about it, you see other people doing it or talking about it, and you learn about it that way. And so I don't think you can say, this is where I learned about it. It's just, you see things, if that makes sense.
They didn't do so good a job on that one. It was very much sort of a self-discovery thing. Google.
Okay, also meine Eltern haben mir da jetzt nicht so viel drüber erzählt, weil ich das gar nicht wollte, weil ich von der Schule schon so aufgeklärt wurde und von meinen Freundinnen habe ich da immer viel drüber geredet und deshalb habe ich das Thema mit meinen Eltern so vermieden, weil mir das ja unangenehm war. Und ich habe mich einfach durch Zeitschriften und Freunde und Schule aufgeklärt. Ja, und durch einen Arzt halt.
My dad said something once about sex is about finding the right person and doing it in the right moment.
Mm-hmm.
So that much I know. And like the whole semantics and technicalities of it have been covered by like school and
well, I would say my dad probably definitely wasn't a big one on having that conversation. But my mom tended to be pretty open about wanting to have that conversation. Of course, none of us wanted to, but she definitely, you know, tried to instill if we were going to have. She didn't really discourage us from like having sex before marriage. It wasn't really a religious thing or anything. It was just kind of like, you know, there's things that can happen. You can, you know, have a kid before you want to. You can, you know, have an STD, so you know you really want to make sure that if you're going to do it, then you really want to, but you need to be safe about it.
Well, my mom is really weird. She would go to Panera and we'd like sit down with our food, and then she'd just be like, I give really good head. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? I'm in a Panera. What are you talking about? So, and then we'd go like on a family vacation and we're driving in the car and she'd be like, yeah, I don't really like when people go down on me because, and I'm like, what? We're just driving. We're doing a normal thing. Why is this turning into a conversation about your sex life? I never wanted to know. Or she'd be like, oh, it's Todd's birthday, gotta go upstairs. And I'm like, don't, why? So most of my learning about sex is not from my parents. I mean, like I think I learned like the things my mom really didn't like from my parents, and I think that's sort of educated stuff that I think is really weird. But most of like my sex knowledge comes from the internet. Because my parents would just be like, I mean, I say my parents, my mom would just be like really weird about it.
Ja, gut, es ist auch schon meistens sehr lang her. Hauptsächlich haben wir dieses Thema mit Aufklärung und so weiter immer in der Schule gemacht. Zu Hause aber auch, aber irgendwie, ich weiß nicht, das waren nicht immer so die angenehmsten Gesprächsthemen.
Ich weiß nicht, also ich kann mit meiner Mutter schon drüber reden, aber ich rede da eigentlich eher mit Freunden drüber, deswegen.
Not much. My sister told me about it. I think my parents didn't say much to me. Just to say safe sex, because we don't want to be grandmother and grandfather with 45.
What I figured is that our generation drinks a lot more alcohol than my parents' generation did, or our grandparents, and yeah, that's like, I think it got more intense.
With regard to, I guess, sexuality, there's a lot more acceptance of homosexuality. Alcohol use, I don't know, not sure on like specific statistics for it, so I couldn't cite any changes. Drug consumption, I don't know, it's difficult to say. Well, the recent legalization of marijuana in a couple states, I think, speaks to, I guess, growing acceptance of recreational drug use. But at the same time, like, cultural acceptance or non-acceptance of recreational drug use has sort of like varied decade by decade and year by year over the past 50 years. So I don't think we can specifically say that it's increased or decreased, just that it's changed over time, and right now it happens to be more accepted.
I honestly don't think a lot has changed. I think they did a good job of, separating their younger life from their lives when they had children. I know now from conversations with mom and dad that they would go out and drink and do a lot of the same things we do. So I don't think it's changed all that much. I think there's just a perception that it has, because I think my generation is less able to contain and conduct themselves. But I think it's always been there.
Oder hat sich viel verändert. Das ist sehr viel. Also der Alkoholkonsum ist deutlich gestiegen, der Drogenkonsum glaube ich jetzt auch. Vor allem bei den jugendlichen Leuten, weil es halt eben dieses Hobby geworden ist, und auch beim Sex, dass das viel früher immer geht und dass der auch gar nichts mehr mit Liebe oder Gefühlen zu tun hat, sondern einfach nur um Spaß zu haben und weil es halt einfach witzig ist oder cool ist. Und es hat nicht mehr so mit dem, also hat ein bisschen an Bedeutung, sag ich jetzt mal, verloren. Ist einfach so hobbymäßig und nicht mehr so, ja.
So my parents' generation's like the baby boomers and the Woodstock folk. So
Yes.
they were very empowered through like the sexual and drug revolution. And I think what's changed now is that there's a more systematic like approach through school to kind of educate young people about these things. And so like drinking and smoking and doing drugs and having sex at a young age have all kind of become things that young people don't do as much as the last generation when they were young.
Mm-hmm.
But when they do, it's probably a bit safer and more knowledgeable. They have more knowledge of what they're doing.
I don't really think much has changed. I think that the only thing that has changed for us is that we've become more open to talk about it. And, I know back when my mom was younger, her family took in a couple of girls that, had gotten pregnant in high school, and it was just really like the parents would send them away to a different high school and stuff, I guess, so they wouldn't be shunned or shamed about it. And I think it's becoming more open, where it's kind of not necessarily accepted yet, but it's just kind of like, hey, it happened. There's nothing you can do about it, so I guess it is a little bit more acceptance. I just think that back in my parents' generation, a lot of the stuff was happening that was going on now. It was just, they kept it behind closed doors, and, nobody talked about it like we do now.
As far as to drugs, drinking, and sex. I think sex has changed, but I think that's part of the way that our generation thinks about people and communities, because we talk, I think, way more about sexual safety and sexual health than our parents did. From just talking to my parents, I think that they had some knowledge of some ideas, but I think there's others that they just had never contemplated. They had the safe sex talk, I think, but I think that in terms of the more, I wouldn't say like philosophical, but in sort of that, the more, the less concrete things, I think that our generation thinks about more. I don't think my parents' generation really debated like what constitutes sex. I don't think they had classes devoted to just figuring out what constitutes consent, what constitutes sex, figuring out a way to make sex not heteronormative and stuff like that. Because I think now we say, well, we don't want to consider sex just penis and vagina and penetration, because those two things may not always be there. So I think that our generation looks into that more than my parents' generation. And then drinking and drugs. I don't know, I have to think about the fact that my parents were born, my mom was born in like 67, so I can't really be like, they were born in the 60s. They were hippies. But my mom tells me about times when she like snuck into a football game with like little bottles of alcohol like hidden in her boots and stuff like that. So, and that sounds like totally something that people of our generation would do. So I think that there's always going to be in the younger generation like this sort of thrill of sneaking alcohol into places they're not supposed to be in and stuff like that.
Ja, ich denke mal, dass das Alter immer weiter runtergeht. Also indem man jetzt Sex hat oder Alkohol trinkt oder so, geht immer weiter nach unten. Also wo es früher bei vielleicht 17 war oder 18, ist es heute bei 14. Und naja.
Ja, dass natürlich immer Leute immer früher trinken, früher Sex haben.
Ja.
Mehr. Obwohl ich glaube, dass Leute früher genauso getrunken haben und Sex hatten.
Ja.
Aber ich glaube, es ist halt alles früher einfach. Es sind halt alle früher reif. Und,
Ja.
I think the generation of my parents, if you said to your own mom maybe that you had sex with 16, they couldn't do this. So my parents know it and they say nothing. I think it's much more accepted to have sex before your marriage, or I think in Germany, I don't know how it is in the US, in Germany for 100 or 50 years ago, you didn't talk so much about this. So in the TV, there wasn't talked about it. I think this is you now can talk about it and can write in the newspaper or these magazines how to do it better, or what for techniques you can use and what for things you can use, or there's advertisement for sex toys. 40 years ago, if a producer did that, we would get killed, I don't know.
Hard to tell. I mean, maybe you can drink more, but I'm not really sure. Maybe there are new things. I mean, drugs have been developed just like in the last generation.
Yeah.
So maybe there are new
Drug menaces.
Yeah, something. Maybe weed is legalized and then that grows a bigger issue or something. But that's speculation.
And I have no idea. I mean, I expect, just based on past trends, that we will continue to become more accepting of alternative sexualities. I expect that we'll continue to be more accepting of recreational drug use. And I hope we'll become safer about alcohol consumption, but I don't know.
I think anyone could hope that it becomes less and less stigmatized on all counts. I mean, drinking should just become, it's just a social thing. That's what it boils down to. There's always going to be people who abuse it, but I think the more you educate people properly about it, the more it will become less stigmatized as this, devilish thing. And in the end, it's a beverage. It happens to have interesting and unique flavors, and there's a huge variety of it. So that it's just another thing to be consumed and enjoyed responsibly.
Ich bin mir nicht ganz sicher. Also es wird sich sicher irgendwas ändern, aber ich weiß nicht wie genau. Also die Jugendlichen werden wahrscheinlich weiter trinken, denke ich. Und Drogenkonsum, glaube ich, dass der auch steigt, aber das kann man nicht so genau sagen, glaube ich, weil früher hatte das auch niemand so wirklich gewusst, dass heute so viele Jugendliche schon so früh trinken. Aber ich glaube, das hält sich erstmal noch eine Zeit lang, dass halt so viele Jungen trinken und Drogen nehmen und so.
Oh, it's changing all the time, I think. Eventually, these campaigns to decriminalize and legalize marijuana will kind of reach a national level, and that might spur some changes in how we approach drinking. And as far as sex, I think the way states are campaigning for same-sex marriage and kind of reforming the idea of how we think of sexual orientation and gender, and is going to affect eventually how we view having sex?
Yeah, I think they'll change. I mean, it's. I think our generation, once we, have kids and start to raise them or whatever, I don't know if it's necessarily going to change much as far as opening. I think that, like, there's just something about having kids that you're going to, there's going to be mistakes you made and you're going to try to prevent them from making them. I think that's just kind of like a natural thing for parents to feel like, since they already experienced the mistake, there's no reason their kids had to. So I don't think it'll ever really be like completely just an open subject that we can talk to our kids about and be like, oh, you do whatever you want, you're free to do what you want. I think there'll always be kind of that wanting to hold them back and keep them from doing it as long as you can. But I think that there will always be issues involved with it. I think that our generation's kind of making a problem as far as drug culture and stuff goes, especially in college and everything like that. I think that you don't really realize until you get out of college how many issues are surrounded by drinking and, well, alcohol I guess is considered a drug, but around drugs and, you're not considered an alcoholic in college. It's not until after that. So it's not until, you get older that you start seeing your friends and you're like, wow, they actually have a problem. So I think that's just kind of always been a cycle. Like, you don't really realize that it can be such an issue on your life and cause so many problems until your partying stage or whatever you want to call it is over. So
I think with our current, real and legitimate fascination and interest and concern about consent and about establishing new ideas of the way that sex is and the way that what sex looks like and how much sex matters. I'm big into the queer community, and so we talk about sex a lot, not a lot, but about the way that sex can be seen by others, the way that certain movements can be exclusive of certain people, because some people talk about, the consent movement and leave out any queer consent issues, or they'll talk about just definitions of sex that don't really jive with queer, or they'll talk about how every person wants sex and then that is exclusive of asexual people, and then the question of can sex be separate from love, and which a lot of people in the queer community say, oh yeah, of course, because we know people who are asexual, these people, they love their partners and it has nothing to do with sex. So I think that as the queer community pushes for people to be included into things, that'll definitely change the way that we are looking at sex and the way that we define sex and the way that we talk about it.
Naja, inoffiziell denke ich schon. Also, wenn man damit immer lockerer umgeht und so weiter und das immer, selbstverständlicher und so weiter wird, dann wird sich da schon was ändern. Ob es jetzt gesetzlich sich groß was ändern wird, weiß ich nicht. Also ich hoffe mal, dass das deine Frage ein bisschen beantwortet.
Ja.
Ja, ich glaube schon, dass es auch immer früher werden wird.
I think so. I don't know. Maybe it's getting much more freer. I think the people will have sex earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. I didn't learn anything about alcohol, but I tried a bit first, and then it didn't really affect my life in a bad way.
My life, yes. My friend's life, I don't know.
Taught enough. Well, from a purely educational standpoint, there's almost nothing. You get, sort of a highly basic sex ed class that kind of comes too late and is much too little, and they are so handicapped in what they can and cannot do that they end up, it's just wasted time in the end, because they don't cover the hard issues, going back to the whole binge drinking and situations arising from that. You have issues with consent, and people don't know what no means, and you know, you get a lot of awkward situations that can become very bad and very damaging. But I mean, never once was the word consent uttered in any sex ed class I had. That was definitely something you sort of had to learn, and well, thankfully I was raised with decent communication skills. So you, and I'm a literal person, so no means no.
Ja, das glaube ich schon, weil ich mich mit dem Thema auch davor beschäftigt habe eigentlich, und dadurch, dass ich auch ältere Geschwister habe, bin ich da auch gut aufgeklärt worden, und ich denke, ich weiß da schon einiges drüber.
I mean, yeah, to a certain extent. I know what these things are, and I know what I want to do and what I don't want to do. But sometimes when you're in a moment, it's kind of unnerving. You've never actually been like approached to smoke weed or something, so like you're kind of taken aback, and you think, I've never been in this situation. What am I going to do? And so maybe not most prepared, but at least I had an action when I had that question in my mind.
Yeah, I think that I feel pretty comfortable about how everything's worked out for me. I mean, I've definitely had my run-ins with drinking, and but that's just part of it. If you decide to take part in it, it's going to affect you in ways, and you're going to make stupid decisions. But I did that on my own. I think that I had all the knowledge. I definitely had all the knowledge that was bad about it going into it. But I mean, it didn't stop me from experimenting with it. So I don't think there was much more they could do, and I think there's probably some stuff they could do better, but you don't know it until it's over. So
yeah, I mean, I was maybe not taught about them in the most careful way, but I definitely, and I think some of it, what I did was self-taught. I definitely think most of my sex knowledge was self-taught. I think it was just me being on the internet and wondering, and I remember when I was in middle school, somebody made some joke about how condominiums was really funny, and I remember thinking oh yeah, it's like condiments, and then after that, when somebody was like, no, after that, I started being okay, well now I need to figure out all of these dirty jokes, so that I'm not in middle school and not understanding the jokes anymore. So that's when I really started being oh, that's what that is. And so now I feel like the way that my parents did it was good enough. It worked out. I don't feel like I was not informed enough, because I feel like I filled in to wherever, or my friends filled in for wherever I didn't know.
Beeinflusst.
Ja. Ja, ich denke schon. Aber das muss man halt alles selber ausprobieren und bringt nichts, wenn man darüber jetzt immer nur was hört. Also, aber ich kann mich nicht beschweren.
Nee, eigentlich wird man erst darüber aufgeklärt, also erst auf weiterführenden Schule halt, wenn es dann soweit ist eigentlich schon.
Ja.
Naja, sex, yes, in the school we had it in, I don't know, 7th grade, okay, but in alcohol, no. So when I was 14, okay, they said it's bad for you, but they said not what's going to happen with you. So they tried that you take it as late as possible, but not that tell you where the danger is, or I don't know. And drugs, okay, my teacher said do not do this, and showed us horrible pictures and horrible films, but no more.
I can't think of anything, honestly.
Can't say there's anything.
Okay. Do you
It took
have
a long time for them to affect my life, so I gotta learn a lot of stuff.
That it's not as big a deal as it's made out to be. I mean, the drinking, it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly that it's not it's not some sort of nectar of the gods. It's not this wondrous material. I mean, it's an incredible tasting beverage, and it's interesting. There's a lot of complexity to it, and you can learn a lot about it, but it's just not that big a deal. The same thing with sex. Everyone makes a huge deal about it, and I mean, it is a very intimate thing, but it's a lot of that sort of the stigma attached to it. And I mean, it's just another pleasurable pursuit like drinking and smoking and everything else. I wish it had been made more clear than that it's, as long as you're responsible about it. I think that's sort of the key, is you have to be responsibility and you have to teach that responsibility.
Ich glaube, ich wusste da schon ziemlich viel. Also ich wusste eigentlich schon genug Sachen drüber. Deshalb, nee, eigentlich nicht.
I guess for the drinking thing, finding people who you're comfortable around will make it a lot easier, I suppose. Because like me growing up in high school, I'd always had this idea that I'm never going to drink because that's something my parents did, and want to be a rebellious teenager or whatever. And when I found people that weren't like pressuring me to do it, they allowed me the opportunity, but didn't say one way or another that I needed to. That's what you kind of want, and I guess it kind of spills over into drugs and sex. That you want to be in a situation where you're comfortable with the people around you to do it or not do it.
I don't think this is necessarily something I could have been told by my parents. I think it's something that's more just kind of embedded in society, but especially for males and in the United States, I feel like there's really emphasis on trying to have sex, and that's like just such a goal of especially boys in high school. It's just to like work towards doing it, and I think that we spend so much energy as a society of like surrounded by having sex that it's a waste of time. I think that there's just too much emphasis on sex in this culture. Well, not in this culture since we're in Germany, but in our culture. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I definitely think that I kind of wish somebody would have been like, which it was never really too big of an issue for me, but it was a lot for my friends and just how it affected them, and wish people could have kind of been like, hey, it's not that big of a deal, and it's not the best thing in the world by all means. So, I think that would have helped a lot.
I mean, I feel like it would have been nice not to have the anxiety of you take a sip of a beer and then instantly addicted. But I think that at the same time, that anxiety helped me to stay out of a lot of high school peer pressure kind of stuff. I feel like that anxiety kept me from going to parties that I wouldn't have been comfortable at anyway. And it let me say to people like, oh, I don't want to drink, and give them a reason. Because I think a lot of times people will be like, oh, why don't you want to drink? You should be drinking. Like, it's really fun. You should find out, and stuff like that. And I find myself saying that sometimes, and then I go, I do. But I definitely think that the story of my dad was an alcoholic gave me a good out. And even when people started to break the idea of like, oh, it's not just once, unless it's like a really hard drug. But not like once when you take a sip of beer, you like aren't instantly addicted. I was like, oh, okay. And so then I started testing things out, knowing that I had the support group that would say you're getting too far. That was definitely the most important part, is that I had a support group of people who would say, I'm looking out for you, and you know that you need somebody looking out for you, and this is getting too hard. So I think the way that I learned about drinking and drugs was okay. I mean, it wasn't the most informed, but I think it worked out. And in terms of sex, like, my self-taught, I think, has really helped me being older, because it's allowed me to separate myself from what my older generations are teaching me. So I feel like older generations are going to try to teach you the things that they learned, and then I think my ability to learn from my generation or parts of the older generation that are from communities I'm involved in is helping me to sort of separate myself from my parents, which I think is really important for people my age especially, that they need to separate themselves from their parents. This is the time when identity shifts from how you are with your family to just how you are by yourself. So I think the way that I learned about it is unconventional and maybe not the best in terms of feeling like I need to go onto the internet to learn about something, but I feel like it's good for my independence that I don't need to rely on my parents to teach me about things.
Na gut, mit Drogen habe ich bisher noch keine Erfahrungen gemacht. Und werde ich in Zukunft, denke ich, auch nicht machen. Aber eigentlich glaube ich nicht. Soweit eigentlich alles okay.
Nee. Jetzt, ich glaube, die macht man erst selber, wenn man es ausprobiert hat. Dann kann man, ich glaube, das kann man erst mit der eigenen Erfahrung dann sagen.
Ja.
Oder machen. Ja.
Maybe by alcohol, that's if you take it, that it can last a time until you get drunk. Because the first time I drank 1 liter of beer and I didn't notice it, drank very fast, and from one moment to the other moment I was down. So yeah, maybe somebody had to say this to me. I don't know.
Not hugely. I mean, I guess from what I've seen, I do think that Germany has a safer and more rational culture with regard to a lot of these topics. But that's not based on much experience. So.
Well, the grass is always greener. You know, the Americans look at Europe and see this very free, you know, sort of progressive society, and then you can sort of compare the two, but then like living here you compare and there are a lot of the same issues, they've just arisen in different ways. Like the drinking age is lower here, but you still have an environment that promotes binge drinking, and so the net result is the same. The ages might vary, you know, now it's 17 and 18 as opposed to high school years, but the net result's still the same. So I think it's important to not just think it's an American problem, it is sort of a global issue.
Okay, ich muss kurz überlegen. Nee, ich glaube, da fällt mir nicht.
No.
No, not really.
I think so.
Für mich zum Beispiel ist jetzt Alkohol nicht so wichtig. Aber für andere, glaube ich schon. Also das ist ein großer Bestandteil des auf jeden Fall.
Ja.
Also auch hier manche Leute, die wollen wirklich dann jedes Wochenende wirklich trinken. Also
Ja,
ich
das stimmt.
das ist halt nicht so. Aber hier fangen die meisten schon an mit, also jetzt so 13, also bei mir noch nicht in meiner Generation, aber jetzt so die Jüngeren fangen schon an mit 13, 14.
Ja.
So, richtig.
Ja, als ich vorher in Deutschland war, habe ich das bemerkt. Ich gesagt, du bist so jung.
Ja, auf der Wiesn zum Beispiel, die sind alle so jung.
Ja, stimmt.
Und die sehen ja noch älter aus, weil die hier hingeschminkt sind und so. Die sind auch wahrscheinlich noch viel jünger als sie.
Ja.
Don't know. No.
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 Your questions were very good.
I'm just gonna cut all this out. Okay, just do your hair bow.
Yeah, good.
Do your hair bow. I have to restart now.
I'm
sorry. Don't care about
I'm doing it right next to the goddamn camera.
It's just gonna be
Exactly. Okay. So now.
right.
Again.
My interview, take 2.
And do you think that it's okay to drink alcohol, smoke weed, or have sex? Okay. So do you think that many teenagers smoke weed or take other drugs? And Emma, I can hear your headphones. I'm going to bleep out this part. Emma, I can hear your headphones. I'm going to take out this whole part. Emma, I can hear your headphones. Emma, I can hear your headphones. I'm just gonna cut out
There's a
this whole
string.
part.
There's a string of Emma. I can hear your headphones.
Okay, I'm sorry. Just been trying to hear
Emma, I can hear your Zooski.
What is a disco biscuit?
I think it's like LSD and I don't remember. I think it's like LSD and something.
Ach so. Naja, in Amerika heißt es ja immer, die Leute werden alle fett und ungesunder Ernährung und so. Aber ich weiß.
Diese Themen.
Meinst du die? Meinst du sowas?
Was? Nein, ich meine mehr mit Drogen und Alkohol
so.
und alles. Was?
Ich hoffe, dass das deine Frage ein bisschen beantwortet hat, oder bin ich jetzt komplett
Nein, das
falsch?
ist okay.
Okay.
Es gab keine rechte oder falsche Antworten. Das ist nur, was du denkst.
My party coming is Zooski.